Hi everyone, Julia here from The Art of Creating with another watercolor painting tutorial. In this video, I'm going to show you how to paint these bright autumn leaves. First things first, I'm taping the edges of my paper and drawing a light sketch with just a normal graphite pencil. Then I'm wetting the whole paper with just clean water and going over it a few times, giving it a few minutes to soak in, making sure that everything is equally wet. Then I'm going through the whole background, adding drops of color in various areas, making sure I'm leaving some white space in between, and that gives my paint some room to spread out and blend with the neighboring colors. At the same time, some colors I don't want to mix too much, like for example yellow and purple, in which case that's why I'm leaving some white spaces in between. The paint will spread, but it won't mix too much with each other, and it will give me a nice transition in color. The background looks like very blurred out leaves, various colors, foliage in the trees behind these three leaves that are our focal point. So I want to give a bit of an imitation of variation of the colors and the shapes, but I don't want to focus on them too much because I don't want to attract the viewer's attention to those leaves. I want the leaves in the foreground to pop. And that's why I'm going to add a lot more detail to the three leaves in front and leave all of the background blurred out. That is also the reason why I have started adding some of the background color into the leaves as well. I'm making it at this initial first layer, I'm making it look like it's all one background so that the front leaves blend into the background as well. But the way I'm going to make the three front leaves stand out is by adding a little bit more darkness to it and the shadows and a lot more detail as well. Once I've finished with my first layer, I'm going to let my painting dry completely and then repeat the process by wetting the paper with just a clean water and adding in some colors that I feel like I've missed, intensifying some of the colors in the background, and also adding some background branches, which are going to be very light. So I've just added a very light indigo blue to those branches, and that way they look like they're faded. Once my background is finished, I'm going to start adding a lot more detail to the leaves. So the three leaves are a focal point and we want to bring them forward so that we want them to stand out from the background. And as I mentioned earlier, we are going to do that by adding more detail and intensifying the colors. So I'm going through all of those leaves one by one, adding some spots, some oranges, some greens, some browns, just adding a little bit more interest to those leaves. The reason I've left the whole painting to dry before moving on to the third leaf is because it's already started to dry and I didn't want to disturb the color that I've applied already underneath, and I wanted to make sure there's going to be no blooms or any spots that I would accidentally rub out. So to do that, I would have had to wait for it to dry completely again and then wet the whole area with clean water and start working on it again the same way as I have with the previous two leaves. Once I've added those spots and colors in the final leaf, and you can see how they were spreading out nicely and blending in, because if I did it on a completely dry leaf, they would be very defined. This way I've added the color and it sort of blends into the background a little bit more. Once that part's finished, I have started adding a little bit more definition to the previous leaves as well, because of course they are already dry, and that's why we can do those really tiny details and they're not going to blur out or fade. And we are going to do that with a very tiny brush, and very concentrated mix of paint. And for paint, for outlining the leaves, I'm using a variation of some dark greens and some dark oranges or reds, just depending on the area of the leaf. I'm avoiding using black because black can make it look a little bit more cartoony. So I've opted for just darker versions of the colors that I've used on the leaves already. And once those details are in and I've painted in some veins with the light green color, I'm going to go in with some very dark mix of indigo blue and paint in that front branch. For the branch, to make it look a little bit more dimensional, I've painted the bottom part of it with a darker mix and then the top half of the branch with a little bit diluted mix as well. That way it looks like the top part is a little bit lighter and the bottom one is a little bit darker, and it gives it a more rounded form. When you paint branches, make sure that you don't make them completely straight. There is a slight variation in thickness, there's a few bumps on it and a few curves, because in real life branches are not completely straight, and if you're trying to make your painting look realistic, this will add a bit more realism to it. To make it look even a little bit more interesting and stand out, I've added some white gouache to the tops of the branches in a few spots where I could see highlights in my reference image, and that just adds a little bit more detail to the branches. Then I've done the same with some of the highlights in the leaves as well as the veins in the leaf. Unfortunately, it's hard to paint around the veins in the leaf when they are lighter color. So it is an easy way to add the veins after you've finished the painting of the background with all of your colors, and just add it with the white gouache. In saying that, white gouache could be a little bit too white in some sections and doesn't make it look too realistic. So to overcome that, I have mixed white gouache with some of the yellow that I've used in the leaves, and that way I'm getting more of an opaque yellow color. The advantage of that is that it acts the same as white paint because it's still gouache mixed with the watercolor, and it makes it opaque, which means I can go over the previous layers and it's not as transparent, so I can add that paint color on top. If you've got any questions about using gouache or adding it to your watercolor painting and mixing it with other colors, leave me a comment, and there will be a few options on the screen of other videos that you can watch if you would like to see more. I will see you in one of those.